In this episode, the Dorks talk to Pete Majewski of Autodesk about AU 2023, going back to Vegas, understanding the contractor dilemma of prefabrication, and many, many more things. It was a wonderful conversation. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. And we are live. The Dorks coming at you here right after AU, talking with Mr. Pete Majewski. And it's just me and Travis tonight. Trent and Jeff have scheduled off to something else. And the funny thing is, both me and Travis actually missed AU. And Travis, when was the last time you missed AU? Because for me, it was like probably a decade ago was the last time.
Yeah, easily. I started I started with the Helm Group just a tick over 8 years ago, and I've been going to AU the entire time. Obviously, the COVID years notwithstanding, but yeah, this is the first one I missed. Unfortunately, I was kind of disappointed to miss AU. Like I said, it's kind of been a regular trip for me, but now that I'm in the association world, SmackNet had their fabrication forum that they put on. We put it on in Indianapolis at Pointer Sheet Metal down there. So we had our own event. It was a fabulous event. Trent was actually there doing his Stratus deal, so that's why he missed it as well. But first time in a long time.
Yeah, and it was a year I wanted to go to. I was excited to have it back in Vegas. I like the Vegas. I mean, actually, as much as people whined about New Orleans, I had fun in New Orleans. I did. I had fun in New Orleans. The classes I went to were awesome. It was a good time. But so Mr. Travis, why don't you kick us off with what you're drinking today, man?
Yeah, so tonight I picked up one of my it's a semi-local favorite. It's from near Madison, Wisconsin, which isn't too far from me, about 90 minutes from me. It's J. Henry. It's a Wisconsin bourbon. I was telling Jonathan earlier that I probably poured myself too much. I have to really kind of sip it because I'm going to go play poker with some buddies later. I need to make sure my faculties are all there. But now looking at the bottle, I just realized it's also cask strength. So tonight could be a disaster for me.
Very
nice. What about you, Jonathan?
Well, I'm going with a cask strength Lefroy Scotch. And I really wanted like a peaty Scotch today. I've been in the mood for a peaty Scotch pretty much for like 3 days, but I've been a good boy and haven't been drinking during weekdays. I know this is a weekday, but it doesn't count because it's right before a holiday.
It's a pseudo weekend.
It's a pseudo weekend. It's a pseudo long weekend. But I'm not playing poker tonight, Travis. So I'm gonna have a decent pour. Pete, why don't you tell us what you're drinking? But also, why don't you tell our audience who you are and give us a little background about Pete, man?
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll start with the important stuff first. I'll start with the bourbon. I'm going with a Bowman Brothers bourbon from a local distillery, actually in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So small batch, nice little change up from your some of the larger brand spirits I keep in the cabinet. But nonetheless, nice start to the long weekend, as you guys said. And also, gentlemen, thank you very much for having me on this evening. Certainly a lot to talk about in regards to AU. And actually, it was my first AU. So believe it or not,
wow.
From the contractor side, it was something that I never really I'd be lying if I said I had a lot of free time to work into the schedule for travels. But nonetheless, a lot of great experiences that I'm excited to share with you and kind of overview for those that may not have had the opportunity to go this year. Overall background on myself, my name is Pete Majewski. I'm based out of Washington, D.C., and I currently work with Autodesk. With my role there, I'm in the construction division, and I do a lot both with the sales teams as well as the technical aspects of product, as well as some specialty contractor initiatives with the different divisions amongst Autodesk as a whole. So if you're wondering where the specialty contractor passion and theme comes from, prior to joining Autodesk, I most recently was in operations at a company named MC Dean out of Northern Virginia, where I ran all prefab and modular delivery. So from an MEP perspective, it certainly is a passion of mine, and it's really where I would sink my teeth into as it comes into the nuts and bolts of conversation, the work packaging, and even the industry expertise and Rolodex. So I've been fortunate to be able to keep my foot somewhat in that door while coming to the tech side. What I couldn't appreciate more from your caricature, John, than was the matrix aspect of that red and blue pill. And I don't want to overanalyze it, but in some ways, that's exactly how I look at my role now, is almost that, we could call it a fork in the road, or that red pill or blue pill methodology, but it's really coming down to knowing what it takes to build things is great. I really wanted to see what it was like on the dark side here, and look behind the curtain on what it looks like to scale some of the software platform aspects, as well as the perspective from the construction tech side of the industry, that is obviously much more removed from the value added piece of wrench turning and terminating wire in the field, but nonetheless, some great variety and frequency of discussions with many different companies and market sectors throughout the nation.
Yeah, and we started out with a conversation down in Austin, and I remember you sitting down at the bar and you introduced yourself, and you said you were from Autodesk, and I'm expecting a software discussion, and it wasn't. It was an ops discussion on prefab. More specifically, it was a discussion on lean and added value, and really driving added value. And I was like, oh, you need to come on our show, because this is like there is a level at which I think, our show really does play to the software, plays to the technology. And I think that there's a loss of understanding how operationally relevant knowledge impacts that. Like, if you understand operations and you understand where the value is in that realm, now you have the ability to really use the software. And I'm sure you're seeing it now, and we'll talk more after we ask you about AU, about the prefab side. But I was really excited actually to see Autodesk bringing someone into their construction technologies, area that had that background in prefab, that's like a functional background. Because I think a lot of times they'll get people that are very upper level that don't understand. They're great people and everything, but they don't understand exactly what's going on prefab and what's possible. When you sat down, you did not talk about pie in the sky things. You talked about stuff that I was fabbing, that Travis is fabbing, that we're all fabbing. So it's like relevant in a very different way. But it was really nice to meet you there. And I got to say, I am very, very late with getting you on the show, because you should have been on the show. I think that was it was like a year and a half ago.
Oh, hey,
it was a long time.
Regardless, brother, time flies. So here we are.
Yeah.
Fortunate to have this discussion with you both, and many more to come.
So I got a question for you, Pete, and we have to open with the AU. This is the first time I missed AU. I love AU. It used to set. I mean, I don't actually love it for construction. I love it across the board. It teaches you all kinds of fun stuff. But how did it go? This is your first AU, and you're working for Autodesk. I actually want the story. Like what did you think? You've been to a bunch of. Yeah, you've been to a bunch of other conferences, man. So like your conference, you're road warrior, kind of.
Yeah.
How did it feel to go to your business's sort of grand event?
So I guess I'll start with the behind the scenes perspective as far as the planning aspects I was involved with. And by no means am I actively involved or a stakeholder when it comes to the event planning or the field marketing piece or the actual week setup specifics for an event like that. But I must say that the effort that goes on behind the scenes is 10 times more than anything I would have expected. So that might not be a surprise to you, gentlemen. But when it comes down to the amount of help internally, or whether it's third party or vendor, or even some of the support and shared services that are there is just such a robust network of people to tell you what you need to do, help you do it, told you what you did, and make sure that you're on time, you're checked in, and not in a hand-holding type fashion, but even I led a panel on specialty contractor aspects and operations. And this was something that the original conversations kicked off with back in May. So if you were to roll back the calendar and start flipping through the pages of the check-ins, the supports, and what's nice too is there was an aspect of it that was always a guiding factor to say, here's your resources, here's how you can use them, but very little overwhelming mandatory items. There's certainly deliverables that were mandatory, but when it came to check-ins, there were 0 time-wasted meetings put on my calendar, which was something I was a little apprehensive about, because at a company this size, you often run into people who want to have meetings about having meetings. And I haven't lost that aspect of my ops management brain that says, keep me away from those. So I was very fortunate that I didn't get pulled into anything like that too early on. But also during the week of the event, phenomenal planning between making sure people knew where to go. Everybody was bought in. And fortunately, being in Vegas, the venue itself has a full-time staff that knows how to run events. And I think that's a difference. Similar to when you go to a restaurant, and you guys know I'm big on the restaurant analogies. And, when you sit down, they bring you your water, your utensils, your menus. Can I get you something to drink? There's a flow throughout the dining area to where you can see everybody's doing something. They're not over top of each other. Not everybody comes out and goes away at the same time. There's always somebody circulating. Very much true with if you needed to find an escalator, an elevator, where your break room was, where the briefing center was. If you couldn't find something, it was because you didn't look far enough to the left or right to find the support for it. So I think in terms of the logistics on site, phenomenal. I'm a stickler for those because similar to what we were talking about a few moments ago before we went on recording here, the ad hoc meetings are some of the most valuable conference run-ins you can have, whether it's the happy hours, the coffee hours, in between sessions. And I did not run into a single situation where I couldn't find a sit-down spot with a customer or a colleague, or I needed to take a phone call. And you guys know how much I talk. So when it comes into running into people, there was room set up, table set up to where the venue truly created more organic opportunity for discussion, for networking, and that was paramount. And obviously, I'm not even touching on the content yet, but the way that the event was run was extremely conducive to the networking, as well as just an overall feel of limiting as much of the chaos and the confusion when you're in those large crowds.
Did you make it to the freshman orientation? Because I have to say, I remember the first time I went to AU, I went to the freshman orientation. It was probably some of the best advice I had. It was like, do not sit by anybody you know. Introduce yourself. Are you worried about sitting at a table? Say, may I join you? And the guy who was running it at the time was very charismatic, was really good. But throughout the rest of the week, he had really kind of given you the rules of how to really do good networking at one of these events. Were you able to make it, or was your schedule too full?
I did not. I had some overlaps, but I also heard very similar feedback from those, especially getting your AU's an interesting conference because, to your point on the road warrior aspect of it, I'm no stranger to the conferences, the conference speaking in that environment. Some might be 200 people, some might be 20,000 people. So I've been to them all and I've spoken at a plethora of them. But I've also noticed AU is interesting because you get a lot of first-time conference goers to that one that are used to operating in silos within their own schools, if it's a student group or companies. So naturally, it's a field trip for them, right? They take the same bus together. They might hold hands walking in the building, and they're taking the same bus out. So that is phenomenal advice to those who need to break the mold like that. It makes the difference between whether or not conferences are productive from not just a networking perspective, but even just a awareness perspective of if you want to go and take notes, that's awesome. You should, but don't replicate something that you could do at home, watching a YouTube video or having somebody send you a PowerPoint. So that's always my advice to the people that go is meet people because PowerPoints can always be emailed.
Absolutely.
There's a lot there to unpack, and I had several thoughts that popped in my head. The first one was when you transition to Autodesk, everybody mentions going to the dark side. They never say going to the light side, which is funny to me. I don't know. It's just when they go to software. And then another thing that it's interesting that you kind of kicked off with the logistics point. Because when my first AU, I didn't fully understand all that Autodesk was into, right? So same to you. I'd been to several conferences of varying sizes, but this is the first one that I had attended and participated in. That was 15,000 people plus, and wasn't just construction, or not even construction, AECO. So it was interesting that you highlighted the logistics. They're and now that I'm on the association side, I'm getting more involved in planning events. So it must be a massive undertaking.
Absolutely. And it's one of those areas too, where I love getting involved and helping and learning where I can, but certainly not going to add any chefs to the kitchen when it comes to the I thinks or the my opinion. When it comes to those events, there's people who do this full time and are true professionals at it. But for somebody like me who will, if I'm standing in line too long and I'm trying to figure out, okay, why is the queue like this? Like where's the bottleneck that it's so difficult, it hasn't been solved, right? And it's almost like, of course, there were lines there. There were a couple things that took a little bit longer than I thought should have, or at least, that I'll always find something to complain about, right? So there was that aspect of it, but it was executed at scale. I'll say that. So it's something that I think even on the first night, I'll share a little story with you. I went to a speaker reception that was at the venue. It's just I got lost walking through the Grand Canal shops and whatnot, but I made it there nonetheless. And I realized that people were wearing different color lanyards, which no surprise. There's colors for Autodesk employees, colors for customers, color for the event staff and whatnot. So I was chatting with a couple of the folks from the event staff and found that 4 individuals, their only job was to manage the speakers, and 4 full-time equivalents were going through the massive speaker list to see who checked in, who was at the right place they were supposed to. Was there communication? Was there a flight change? And to the point where there was direct one-on-one communication with a real person and the speaker that was absent, and it blew my mind. But when you think about it, that's that snowball effect to where, if you have a single speaker session that missed a flight or is sick or can't come for whatever reason, well, now you need to reschedule a room, which might be 200 people that need to figure out something else to do. So that real-time communication is happening constantly. And the goal to know that it ran successfully is so that none of the attendees know that there's a hiccup. It's just a matter of, hey, session's canceled, session's moved. Hey, there's a change to the speaker list. There's an alternative in, and all of that is something that I could have gone to 10 AUs and I never would have thought that was a requirement or role or responsibility, but it's what keeps the clock ticking there.
And they're probably already working on next year.
Absolutely.
They were probably working on it before this year. Yeah. One of the things, it was very well organized compared to the other ones. And I think that's the thing is if you've gone to other conferences that are at a similar scale, you can see where, okay, this is super, super well run. What I've always appreciated is how far afield they go in the classes. Like Travis, I always tried to get 5 classes that have nothing to do with anything. And for those of you who can't see at home, behind me is a hand. So this was something that they made at AU with the stormtroopers the year this, and it's for enable. It's for people that don't have fingers and hands, and it allows them to have a prosthetic. And leaving there, they had trained, I don't know, I'm going to say there were at least 200 people that were at the event. They had trained 200 people, me included, to 3D print these and get them out to people that need prosthetics. And the other 2 things back there, the drone and the spider, both of those are free stuff from Autodesk. Like Autodesk has classes for everything. So if you're there and you're in construction, I hate to say it, construction needs robotics. So if you can't find a construction class, go take a robotics thing because there's tons of them. You know, that's what I really enjoyed about it. I was happy that it was back to Vegas. I actually enjoyed New Orleans quite a bit. Like, I know a lot of people got sick and everything else. I managed to not get sick and have a good trip. You know, I had not been to New Orleans before, so that was fun. Did you get a chance, Pete, to learn anything that did sit down in class and really take some time and learn something that just was like a great takeaway for you from the event?
So interestingly enough, the robotics was a piece that I forced myself to get exposed to. Not that it's something that I don't believe in or don't enjoy. It was just, it's a matter of it doesn't cross my day-to-day routine. As well as the classes that got into the database, and the AI was a big theme, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But to really split hairs here, the ML aspect of AI, right? So we know a lot of ML is just rebranded as AI because that's what sells now. Not to go down the whole route of, oh, is the code writing?
No, that's what this show's is about. So you can use acronyms and go down the hole.
So I'm a stickler for it too, because everything that gets branded as AI these days is really just machine learning algorithm database. So again, if that's what we have to call it now, we'll call it whatever. But I really am really researching in my free time to all of these database aspects. So we've spoken at length before about the mechanical contractors and their database for materials. And then, you know, my background in electrical, knowing that it's even more discrete and confusing when it comes to line items of information that have different nomenclatures. So when it came to the classes that I really sat back and said, oh, wow, you know, like the logo that I work for is covering this. The robotics and the database aspect of it was something that was quite interesting. But I will say that some of the most interesting things that I learned were from observing the engaging audience members and trying to pick their brains, even if it was just for 5 or 10 minutes after a session, to say, well, what's your background? What do you do? Like, why did you ask that question? And I wasn't doing it at every session, but there were a few that stuck out to me, where there's a gentleman from California who has a background in car manufacturing that's got into dashboard and analytics for construction. So all of his questions had nothing to do with construction KPIs, didn't have anything to do with materials other than materials as a reference. And it was just eye-opening to me that you have an individual who's essentially a data scientist, and he's just been taking the same process from your automotive aspect, from the design, automotive from the manufacturing, is now dabbling in the construction end. It makes a lot of sense when you're speaking high level, but even just to realize that he's a data expert at the end of the day. And that's what really caught my attention, to say, oh, okay, you know what? He would not be able to do the job that a 35-year super in the field could, and the same vice versa. But if you could help them communicate to explain what each other's doing, something special could happen there. And ironically, that's kind of where I've fit myself into the industry niche, and similar to what you're saying, Jonathan, with when we met some time ago. I would never claim to be a high-level strategy expert, and I'm not a tactical level, I'm going to train you how to terminate wire. I like to fit right in the middle to explain why both sides of the line should communicate and know what each other's doing. So that's how I approach a lot of the sessions at conferences, to say, I'm not here to write a thesis on a topic. I'm not here to copy and paste the content so I could give the same presentation. I just like learning how to identify who different experts are and where it applies.
Yeah. And you know, with data availability being the way it is, and with the learning models, we're all kind of becoming a new version of the mad scientist on the data side. There used to be a lot of mad scientisting going on in construction, on sort of the construction side, the prefab side, everything else. And now I see a lot of mad scientists on the data side, because they finally are getting answers for all of the things we've been asking for years. Like you talked about the content. I mean, obviously I took all of the content that's in ITM this is really nerd, all of the content that's in ITM. And I said, I just want to look at the connectors, and I want the learning model to look at the connectors and tell me how to better connect this building. And what that means is tell me how to remove fittings by changing the materials on my runs.
Mhm.
And with very, very, very little instruction, it was able to significantly change the way that I thought about doing the model. And that's what I think a lot of these people like are coming in, like you were talking about, that manufacturing guy. I think that's what they're going to give us, because I'm a middleman too. I'm not highly detailed, and I'm not, in the field detailed. I'm just kind of right in the middle. But I think they're going to come out and say the entire idea of how infrastructure within a building works mechanically can be changed and can be something very, very different, because they're looking at these experiments that now allow them to sort of model how a building would be if, one of the great questions I got asked recently by a really nice guy at ABB is like, so we're going to electrify everything. What's a building with sort of unlimited electrical power look like from a plumbing standpoint? Like, do you have instantaneous heaters at every fixture? Did you eliminate all of my central heating because it's electric now? Like, how does that all look? So I think I think these data scientists, like you said, that are coming out of one sector and moving into the other are going to be sort of the people that we look to as gurus moving forward, because they finally have a machine that can tell them, here's how the experiment would turn out if you had millions of dollars to do the experiment. And I cut you off, Travis. I apologize.
I was going to follow on. I was going to bring up the fact that you were highlighting the way that you highlighted earlier about the kind of the ad hoc meetings, and then the way that you approach the sessions. If anyone's ever seen me speak, I will be blunt. If I'm given 50 minutes to give a presentation, I have maybe 20 minutes of content, because I want to engage with the audience. I want to have conversations. And that's the genesis of this podcast. We got kicked in the nuts a little bit by COVID and having our normal conversations that we would have at conferences. So we now do it here. We get a couple cocktails into us, and we nerd out, because that's where we found the most benefit. But I'd like to get back to the content a little bit. You were talking. I agree that the one of the benefits of AU is you get to experience a lot of different stuff. I would go into the animation and the movie side of things, into the industrial and manufacturing, but could you highlight a little bit more of the construction content? And I'm gonna double up on that question, because one of my biggest introductions is literally introduction into AU as speaking on a large stage at Autodesk's construction event that they had the day before AU, but they don't have that anymore. So I was kind of wondering how that construction content has grown or filtered through the rest of the conference.
Absolutely. So the way that content was absorbed for the most part, and this would be me paraphrasing it just to condense it down, would be absorbed into the construction keynote, as well as expanding some of the session offerings for different aspects. So when it comes to the overall messaging on the construction side, there was certainly a theme of the data, not only the data acquisition, but the central data environments, and a lot of what we've been hearing from Autodesk and the morph towards a cloud platform solution over these last few years. So that was by far the anchoring theme. What was made much more tangible is the amount of, I won't call it customer case studies, but truly letting the power users speak rather than the folks that design the software. And I'll give you a personal anecdote on it. I would love to get more sessions speaking on MEP operations and scaling modular processes within an organization, but I don't have the audacity to do that with an Autodesk logo, because I'm here to help support that, but I'm not drawing X's and O's to execute that on the build side anymore. So if we took that same aspect to what we've been trying to do in terms of the messaging and a lot of the awareness, it's letting the power users tell the way they've executed projects and how data has helped them. So there's a lot of companies like the CPPI, DPR, and you could, if you care to, go through the knowledge network and all the Autodesk marketing aspects for those specific areas of content. But this theme is very much relevant to how data has transpired in the field for those users, but more precisely, and I'll give you the tangible piece here, it's really harnessing that communication aspect of how many stakeholders need to be involved with the tech side. So if we were to go back 10 years to where, you know, a PDF editor on your computer was essentially construction tech, right? Marking up documents on the iPad or in Bluebeam or whatever it might be to say, hey, here's how we're building out our jobs. That was construction tech. And then the RFIs and the submittals got a bit more automated, the issue tracking, the photos and everything aggregated. Now, if you fast forward to where it's at, it's almost overwhelming with how many different options there are to record, the project controls, document controls, augmented reality. I mean, we could go on and on with some of those aspects that are available. So the core message behind all of that was, rather than dictating how you should use the tools and how they need to be rolled out and deployed for which projects, is letting the true power users speak to that aspect, and also acknowledging this all-encompassing environment to say, we know that there's teams in different market sectors using many different tools out there, as they should be. Having that central data environment to reference. So whether it's building dashboards that draw data from multiple locations, or if it's a solution that is doing reality capture, that may not necessarily be an Autodesk product. Well, I can tell you that I don't even know all of the partners that are rolled up with the Autodesk network, but I've never been at a loss to look at a partner card and tie in a URL on our internal dashboards to link that information. So when it comes down to it, it was a very broad aspect to say that the products are important, of course, but I was very happy to see that there were no sales content or nomenclature that was thrown up. It was very logo agnostic, and when it comes to the specific products, even when it came to a lot of the customer sessions that were being run, to where they're, you know, it's general contractors, specialty contractors explaining how they use the tools. I know how the tools can be used or should be used. I would rather hear about their projects and say, okay, hey, what did you hit? What does this lead to next? And answering more of the so what question in terms of, okay, great, you acquired all of these digital forms on this one job. How does that help you on the next one? So again, maybe I have a skewed perspective trying to sit back and I put my customer hat. But
I completely agree that to Jonathan's earlier point, especially in, you know, I think most of us use the fab products and stuff, but drawing some of that industry expertise into the actual use, the artful use of the different products and then having those case studies shared back out is huge.
Exactly. And what's interesting too, and I get biased towards it because whenever I see a case studies or an email, or even if it's a social media share, I kind of say, oh man, like, you know, what is this supposed to mean? Now that I see how all that content's generated, there is nobody from our side that's writing a script to say, hey, here's how you executed your project. It's more of a really good note taker and a great person and team to go through and say, okay, here's what we heard. Does this sound like what you were trying to say? Does this resonate with this aspect of the tool? So I really appreciated that, because I, for one, would always hesitate when it came to the interface of getting some of the feedback, or, hey, can you have so-and-so speak on behalf of this product? I've never been in a situation like that to where I felt awkward or felt that that we were searching for something else. And I think AU solidified that when it came to, oh, you know what, these people want to be here. They want to be involved. They're excited to share what's going on. Yeah. It wasn't a marketing ploy in terms of writing a case study or writing a commercial to say, here's how you should run your construction jobs.
Right. Yeah, I can commend them on that, on my experience too, from my big stage experience. It wasn't them crafting my message. It was me saying, these are the bullets I want to hit, and they would come back and help me craft the message. Obviously, when you're doing, because I spoke as part of the keynote in that session. So there was 2 hours. I was 15, 20 minutes of it. So I had to make sure I hit certain marks, but they never told me what to say. They never told me what to say. They just helped me craft my message in a way that flowed with kind of the overarching narrative. So I cut you off now, Jared. Jonathan, sorry.
Oh no, I was actually going to piggyback on the artful use, because when you guys were talking about it, I'm thinking about like, what did I really go there to see? And I went to see artists with a tool. Like a paintbrush, you can paint a room, right? You can paint a house, but you don't want to hear about that. You want to hear about the Sistine Chapel and how was that painted. Same tool, but different methodology. And I think that's why I went to Autodesk those years, is I want to meet the people that are using the tool the most artful way possible. Like people that are overdoing the tool. Because I mean, and I don't want less tools, just putting it out there, don't want less tools, but we have all the tools. We have enough tools. It's using those tools effectively that usually is the difference between, having really stellar projects and really not stellar projects. It's not you're missing a tool. It's you didn't know how to use it, or you didn't know how to use it in an innovative way. And I will say they deliver that again and again and again. I was thinking back to, I'm a homeschool dad. I took a class on how to 3D print something and then move it into Minecraft and then move it into Tinkercad in like one little class. And I'm like, cool. It'll be a cool little homeschool project for my kids. The guy who presented it was a nuclear engineer, and his story and his ability to use these very simple tools that he's now going to teach us how to use with our kids to do massive things was far more impactful than the tool itself. And I think, I don't know if they intentionally do it, but they certainly do a very good job of curating it to get those people that have the most artful way of dealing with the tools onto those stages. I have a sort of follow-up question though on the construction side, because I do hear a lot of criticism. We've removed the construction day from AU. And there's not as much of a draw. There were some other shows, MEP, Innovation is a good show for the contractors that are union. And then what's the one from Evolve and ASC? Travis, my brain's going blank.
You just made me lose it.
MEP
Force.
MEP Force, yeah. So that was
actually, they made it into a road show now, but yes.
Yeah, MEP Force was the other one where you're getting this super contractor centric view. Do you feel like it's more a matter of they're not eliminating contractor, content? It's just their content's more about the use of their product than doing any field? Or what did you feel being from construction, being from fab, going there when you're looking at the curriculums and everything else?
I think that you hit the nail on the head there. And I can't say that as if I know the real answer, but I'll give you my contractor perspective first.
Give me your contract. You're not working for AutoCAD. You're back on the other side. You're a contractor.
Yeah, exactly.
All of it's gone.
I'll start here and then I'll go to my Autodesk employee perspective.
Yeah.
So as a contractor, right, especially within the niche market sectors that I was in, it was all mission critical prefab, right? So federal work, hyperscale data centers, and healthcare. Of course, there were some other items mixed in there, but those are the big three. And very dense MEP systems, right? So a lot of pipe, a lot of wire, a lot of expensive equipment that was high risk. What I did was prefab, modular delivery, industrialized construction, right? If I were to go to a big event like AU with that background and say, oh, I'm going to go to a prefab event, I'm going to go to industrialized construction event, it is designed at scale to where you're hitting a lot more of the broad aspect of the industry, and it's going to be a lot more residential focused, maybe more productized delivery in terms of standardize your design, have a catalog, and roll those out in terms of your offerings. As a contractor, none of that would interest me unless I was in that market sector. So from my previous perspective, I look at that and say, teach me how to scale MEP systems. The best way to figure out how to scale MEP systems is to do it. It's not to listen to somebody at a conference. So that's my, that's my thick skull contractor head, saying, hey, why would I go and listen to a PowerPoint when I have the actual skill set and material at my facility to figure this thing out? So that's one perspective on it. On the Autodesk side now, I would say that when it comes to making sure that we don't have too much redundancy to where there's duplicated efforts, there is that artistic approach, which I never thought of before. So I'm going to steal that from you, Jonathan. But you're right. We want to showcase what a lot of the power users are doing and what people want to see. So it doesn't mean that people don't want to see construction, but there's a lot more of the core competencies that already exist in those other existing units, right? So in terms of the construction documentation and let's just say the ACC platform, all of that is project delivery. But other than talking through a lessons learned from a project or some of those customer, not testimonials, but those case studies to say, hey, here's an example of how we introduced it. You need to get into specific niche workflows that might be work package based or design based or Revit family based that correspond to core competencies in that project delivery for construction. Because if you had more keynotes and more general days that were just talking about listening to a panel of a hospital owner and a GC and maybe one of the trade representatives, it's going to become so interchangeable with content to where, you know, by day 3, nobody's in the room.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it's the artistic aspect of it that definitely plays into it. And also when it comes to bandwidth, I think you follow the markets in terms of what has the most industry traction. And I don't mean construction industry traction, but in terms of the tech industry, the big announcement was Autodesk AI in terms of building in some of those ML capabilities with pre-existing features and merging that into a forward-looking roadmap. That is where a lot of the sessions had the potential to feed into. So a focus group for construction would absolutely be great, but AU is not the trade expert conference. AU is the tech. It's the tool conference.
Yeah.
So
I like that. I like that. It's the tool conference. Yeah. Before we get off the ML though, because I was looking at the time and I'm like, we need to talk about this Autodesk AI. Explain to me what the AI is for Autodesk, because most of our audience knows what a machine learning or a large language model is. They know the other models too. Like there are some products like Drawer, there's Melvin Newman with Patabid that have built learning models, machine learning, that's not on these language models, that's sort of outside that. And the nice part is, so you know, Pete, they're able to remarket it now that people aren't afraid of AI anymore, right. Which is kind of cool. But like, what is at the core of the AI for Autodesk, and what is Autodesk's like internal expectation of where that product is headed that they're putting out there, you know?
Right. No, I certainly hear you there. And truthfully, I'm learning along the way, just as you guys are, where I would say where I have gained a little bit, even between now and the announcement last week, is that a lot of the functionality is built into what data already is baked into the systems, right? So we're thinking in terms of catalog, databases, et cetera. So there's an aspect of it to where you're harnessing more of the data that you've already been reliant on with more of the ML capabilities. Now, again, that's going to vary based on the product and the design aspects that you're in, especially as we're going through this journey of the cloud-based solutions. So that would be my very high level way of explaining it, to say it's a little bit of what you already know and love in terms of this is the content that I'm using. We're making it more efficient for you. But we could spend hours dissecting which tools could harness it in what fashion, and what makes sense to the end user. So using the MEP example, it would be great to have AI go in and automatically map out what fittings should go together. But we all know that it's going to look very different if we're designing a new construction phase or if we're going in for a reno. and it says it's hey, the renovation here is all unknown, right? There's miscellaneous angle hanging. We have to demo to really get in and pull things apart. So there's aspects of it that will certainly be more applicable than others. And my understanding, at least from my team and my awareness with it, is over the next couple of weeks, we'll have a much better forecast on what's prioritized and what is out of the box in terms of the AI ML functionality and what is a roadmap item.
And are you? I haven't seen the announcement. So forgive me, and I wasn't at AU. So are you as Autodesk? Are you opening that up then to your partners then beyond that, so that they can build upon it as well?
Great question, and I don't know the answer to that offhand. When it comes to opening things up, I imagine it would be similar to a lot of the API rollouts that we've seen, to where there's aspects of it that are ready to go day one, and there's aspects that are continuously being built. So whenever I get into, say, dashboard discussions, when it comes to the analytics, the first thing I'll always tell customers is to mock up what you're trying to do first, and then see if the available APIs are there. Don't just deploying APIs for the sake of data migration, thinking that you'll have all these automated reports.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Like my not knowing anything about AU, I thought they might go for what's called a command cluster. I don't know, like if you're working with Adobe products, they do this where we're like, maybe we would go to the end of a corridor and we'd say, hey, all of my jumps up with my pipe and jumps over are not organized correctly, and you circle it, and all it does is runs a bunch of Revit commands to get them to be synchronized. And Adobe's kind of doing this with the way that they're doing their updating your backgrounds and updating your selection sets and everything else. Did you get the chance, because I didn't get to see what they demoed, did you get the chance to see anything that wasn't just data and analytics sort of based, something that was like a little bit more functional for, again, I think it's the difference between the people making the decisions for strategy and for operations versus the people drawing or modeling on the back end.
Very true. I saw a few demonstrations that were more, I call them more video based than it was live in terms of potential product fit. More on the product design aspect. So not that couldn't roll over to the building systems, but it was very much of the more manufacturable design as it comes to components. And I assume what we would refer to as the categories in Revit would be almost the associated parts from manufacturing level detail.
Yeah. Right on.
So this is a show where we talk about networking and drinking. One of the highlights always of AU is the party. So tell me, did you go to the party, and a little bit about it? And if you really want to give me FOMO, tell me the spasmatics were there.
So now, let's see, where would I start here?
Oh my gosh, I miss the spasmatics. I do. I personally miss them.
Yes.
They were, and what I would say in terms of the biggest fear missing out would be you didn't miss. There was some slight rain on the Wednesday evening, the early one, so that was something that was a little damper on the evening for folks. Nothing that ruined the night, but definitely not ideal from the previous couple of days, especially when you're in a building for 72 hours straight. Wednesday morning, I got up and went for a walk just so I could see the sky. So that was something that wears on me personally. What I would say from a networking aspect that, again, ties directly to the logistics is that the venue made it so that if you didn't find something to do, of course, there were invite-only events and whatnot, but it was so open and easy to find a place, whether it was the bars, the restaurants, in terms of the actual structured parties, great. But I liked the aspect that they, of course, had more than enough open bars and hors d'oeuvres throughout the week to grab something to eat and have a couple drinks throughout the evenings. But the pocketed groups of conversation, as well as the overall themes, whether it was the welcoming party or the closing party, great. I mean, almost too many people, to be honest. But the in-betweens are what I found most valuable, because to no surprise, I found myself double and triple booked during some of the blocks, to where it was, okay, I'm looking at my map of like, okay, which way do I need to walk from this happy hour or dinner to at least hit a 35 or 45-minute window at the other obligations I had on the way back to the next event. So it made it very easy to navigate under one roof, although everybody was getting their 20,000 steps in a day. But I think the biggest piece of the missing out would definitely be some of the I think the kickoff to the keynotes were the most energizing, much more than the dinners or happy hours. So those were the ones that if you weren't able to be in there in person and were watching on a screen, one of them I wasn't able to make. So that was my big, my FOMO while there was, I didn't get to the General Assembly on time for one of the keynotes. But outside of it, I think that making the most out of the people that you meet for the first time is what's most valuable. If you're already in contact in each other's phone, you know how to get a hold of each other. I like to go, hey, I was sitting in this session with you. Let's grab a beer. Or hey, I think we worked together before back in this city. So those are the type of connections that I think played out to be most valuable. In addition to the fun booze and eating hours.
For sure.
And Vegas does make that easier. I got to say, like I very much did. I think I'm one of the only people, it feels like, that really liked New Orleans and thought it was a lot of fun. There's Sazerac House was there, which is a big part of it for me. I got to go there, check out Sazerac House, check out Eagle Rare and all of these wonderful things.
The networking just wasn't as convenient. The convention center was long and spread out. So yeah, I mean, like to your point, Vegas is kind of built for that. Yeah, they have the digital sky that you're going to see more than the actual sky. You don't have to go down Bourbon Street and French Street. You gotta go figure out where in the world you are in the Venetian and which way was your room after hitting the bar, which is far more complex than it should be, and definitely needs AI to help you accomplish those goals.
That would be wonderful. I'll have to put that in the suggestion box for next year. We didn't get a lot of time to talk about you, and I would like to we have some more time. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. I'm here as well.
You come out of an operational prefab side. When I first met you, we were really talking about like what is this distance between contractors who want to be successful at prefab and contractors who are already there. Like, really, there's a huge number of small contractors who could be successful at prefab who are struggling a lot. Where do you think, taking AU out of the equation, where do you think they should be looking to sort of get better at prefab? And this is, again, take completely off your Autodesk hat.
Already off.
Completely off. Yeah. Like, what should they be doing? Because when I sat down with you, you understood sort of this, there's a background process to prefab, which you kind of laid out for me in 15 minutes, and I totally stole that from you. So steal anything from me you want. But where do you think they should be looking? Or should they go to AU, and should they just have a different way of sort of navigating that?
So I love the multiple facets to your question there, because this also ties back to your experience and awareness with it. It's kind of knowing that it's not so much. You could turn it into a chicken and the egg discussion of which comes first or why should it, in terms of the process and the people. But one of the things that I have found, especially leaving the four walls of the facility that I used to manage, is that on the broader construction landscape, there are so many different flavors and sizes and means and methods to prefab delivery that then leads to the volumetric aspect that is really all aimed at a modular process, right? So just to kind of differentiate the terms, prefab can happen anywhere. It could happen in the room that you're installing pipe, and you bend it over here and it's installed. It could happen in the corridor, it could happen in a parking lot, or it could happen a couple states away at a facility. And then that volumetric aspect is going to be, can you stack things together in an assembly function? But really what everyone's after is the modular delivery process in terms of getting all of your shared services aligned to thinking in that methodology of delivery. So where I always like to stop people when they get into the manufacturing aspect and they say, oh, we need to become true manufacturers. That's great. If you have an item that's truly productized that you can sell right out of a catalog. In that case, focus on true manufacturing, schedule it to tact, build your standard work, and then get it to the point where you don't need drawings. If you can get it to the point where you don't need drawings, then you can call it standard work. And it's a matter of standard materials, kit of parts, and the associates in your factory don't need a model. They don't need a drawing. And that's how cars are built, right? That's how dishwashers are made, lawnmowers. If you walk a factory floor in one of those environments, you'll never see a drawing on the floor, and everything is paced to tact. So being that construction is very unique and outside of that environment, where I see a lot of the folks who are just stepping into the prefab process, it's that they try to do it all at once, or they have a mentality where you build it and then they will come, right? So that's probably the worst thing you can do, at least in my experience and observing, to where you have people that might have the checkbook to make an investment, but they don't have a rationale on why they're making the investment. So what I like to say, especially to the smaller contractors, right, is that it doesn't matter what your revenue is. It doesn't matter exactly where the what market sector you're in, depending on which competitors you're at. So you could have a $20 million specialty trade and a $200 million and a $2 billion. At the end of the day, to put it bluntly, everyone's building the same shit. The difference are the number of resources and maybe some of the market sectors or the overall scope you have. But everyone's buying material from the same manufacturers at the end, at some form or fashion. So where I see a lot of folks that kick off in the right direction is that they orient themselves to the right peer groups and customers rather than the right conferences out of the gate. Peer groups can definitely be supported through conferences. And in some cases, those are the best way to meet the like-minded individuals. But you'll run into this area that might be either a conflict of interest or simply that you have other peers that are competitors or that keep things close to their chest. So one of the most beautiful parts of my role now is that I'm now in the neutral zone. I'm not competing against other electrical contractors bidding work. I'm not, partnering with different mechanical firms that might be a bit salty because we didn't sign them on for a larger scope for a data center build. So all of that is actually very refreshing for me because it's giving me perspective that doesn't let me see into anybody's secret sauce per se, but it allows me to orient how different companies are running their operations. A good example would be, is your prefab facility running as a cost center or a profit center? At the end of the day, your performance and your products are going to be identical, but where that changes things is internally on, are you treated like a purchase order, or are you treated like a cost that you have to have? And none of this ties into software and none of this ties into materials, but it really changes the political landscape on what some of the artificial ceilings are placed on these business units, because it could prevent them from communicating. It could be a conflict of personalities at the executive level to say, oh, well, we don't believe in prefab, but we have to do it. And it's an itemized expense on one project that they never intend to do again. Or you'll run into some cases where it might be the entire support staff. And by support staff, I mean all of the non-direct labor employees, right? So that's going to be anybody from your admin and office engineers all the way up through your executive suite, all support, right? Not direct labor. Mm-hmm. Your direct labor might be the reason that people don't want to adopt it, but it's not because they want to cause any issues. It's because something has happened on the front end, on translating and articulating the reason why and how it helps everybody. So one of the things that I always say when I'll go into different organizations that are starting their prefab journeys is that I'll typically ask, say it's a receptionist or a secretary that helps set up the conference room. I'll ask them how they get paid. You know, what does Miss Julie do to get paid? And Jonathan, I know you know exactly where I'm going with this. And Travis, you're hearing this for the first time, but I will do this in meetings with the executives and the owners, and I'll sit there and I'll ask them to join the meeting. And they're like, well, okay. I said, okay, so who here can tell me how Miss Julie gets paid? And I'll ask the owner, I'll ask the executives, and they'll say, well, she helps coordinate meetings, and she does activities like this to set up the conference room. She'll do, invoicing, whatever it might be, all administrative tasks, right? And I wait until they stop. Maybe I pick on a few other people, and 10 times out of 10, the answer is wrong. I say, no, Miss Julie gets paid when walls get built. So it's a framing contractor. Nobody in this room gets paid unless walls get built. If it's an electrical contractor, nobody gets paid unless wire gets terminated. Mechanical, duct goes up, et cetera, and et cetera, right? So that is the first way that I articulate value stream to those customers and those in the different clients and those companies, because that's the first problem statement of figuring out, okay, do you know how you earn revenue here? Like, okay, now you know. Do you know, if you look to the left, look to the right, what each other is doing? And if the answer is no to that, that's your next problem statement. So that scaling always has to happen internally first, and then the outside resources come in. And then some of the peer group support becomes tremendously more helpful. And then the vendor support, whether it's software, machines and equipment, or even the material vendors and suppliers that say, hey, we actually have an offering that could help facilitate your offsite delivery. So that's typically the kindling that starts internally, that then gets people thinking outside of their day-to-day activities, but not outside of their scope. And the difference is they're starting to think about different means and methods, but they're not forgetting that they already own the scope of the project. It doesn't change. The building owner could care less on how it gets delivered. The modular concept for them is means and methods to help mitigate risk and guarantee schedule certainty. So that's usually the two things I'll bite onto in terms of, okay, you guys already own the scope. So don't own the electrical scope and then volunteer to build a bunch of walls because you think it makes you look like you're doing prefab.
Right.
Keep it dense and keep it to your scope, and then you can get a little bit more aggressive with what you take on for free.
Yes, I'm totally going to chunk this up in a snippet, because with my new role with SMECNA, obviously when you work with an organization or an association like I am, like, you have your top 10 to 15% that are the big ones. They have all the resources, they're throwing all the stuff at it, and from a sheet metal standpoint, as you know, like, we've been fabricating forever, so that kind of mindset is sort of already there. But to the small and medium sized contractors, like, maybe not so much from the fabrication standpoint, although I would argue even there, but the technology adoption and the BIM and everything. It's like, you have a lot of contractors asking, why should I care? Why should I do this? This doesn't fit my scope. And so I don't even have a follow-up question. I'm like, I'm going to do the same thing as Jonathan. I'm going to steal all of this and put it in all my presentations back.
Yes. This is literally, Pete, this is your mic drop. You do this a lot. And I thought about it, and what it is when you do that conversation, you establish purpose. Purpose is those walls need to go up. That's the purpose. All the things that you do that suck, you can get rid of those as long as the walls go up faster. Like, and I think once you assign that to everybody, not just the people that think that they are the most involved in putting up walls up, but the people that don't realize, like you said, that person that sits at the meetings.
I would like to tease out something there too.
That does it.
A point that Pete made wasn't, and I think that we've all argued this when it comes to prefab and modularization, it doesn't necessarily have to put the walls up faster, but it has to provide certainty and reduce risk. And it's not even necessarily cheaper. I want to point that out too.
I purposely did not use the word price, cost, or financials.
Yeah, literally though, focusing everybody on the goal doesn't happen enough. And when you do that, you see these huge movements. I have to say, my first talk with Pete, we were talking about value added, and my purpose was just to add value to pipe. It sounds really stupid, but my entire, life at that point was, how do you add value to pipe? You thread it, you model it, you already know the length. Do you know the length exactly? Do you know the fittings that go on each end? How do you add value to pipe? And I think that simplification helps a lot of those contractors. So definitely your mic drop. I kind of want to stop there, but don't want to stop there. But definitely your mic drop is assigning that. I have to ask one more thing about.
Oh, yeah. And I'm good time wise too. I'll let you do the editing later, but no, that's you guys know that's my. I love that. I appreciate the mic drop analogy there too, but it's also what I found to be the most consolidated way to explain it to folks, because they're the experts in what they do. And I might be able to learn exactly what they do. And maybe I know an aspect of it already, but at the end of the day is, hey, I can read your project management manual, right? Let me flip through the binder. I'll figure out what your scope is. I'll look at your CPM, and anybody should be able to read that and diagnose, okay, here's what you own. How are you going to make this efficient? And how are you going to make sure that you don't start going down these rabbit holes of what you think you should do based on a PowerPoint that was given by a GC, or because you saw a YouTube video that somebody shared about a prefab delivery process?
Yep. And that goes back to what you said at the very beginning, is they don't need drawings anymore. You know why they don't need drawings? They know what they're supposed to build.
Yeah.
They know what they're supposed to build. You already know what you're supposed to build, and you build it. And I think that's a big part of what's missing. Is there is a lot of distractions. We go to all the conferences. There's a lot of different, thought leadership, but at the end of the day, we're building buildings, and we're putting in pipe, and we're trying to make the structures that people live in, that people get, healed from, and all of those other things. Before we leave though, I had one other question that I personally wanted to know. And, when I left for the dark side, and consulting's kind of the dark side. I did it because I couldn't scale the gray side. I'm in the gray side. I'm on the gray. I couldn't figure a way to scale building where I was at. So what was the core thing that you were hoping to accomplish by leaving where you were at and moving on to that technology piece?
I would sum it into one word, being perspective. And I've actually, since I've left the build side of the industry, have really been using that theme and that singular word there as a rationale for a lot of the reasons why I've developed different daily habits. So I made a point this year to read a book a week, which is a lot of reading. But if you read a half hour in the morning and a half hour before you go to bed, you can read a book a week. So not that I'm making that a manufacturing analogy when it comes to the tact and the breakout and decoupling of scope, but hey, if you do the same thing every day, a little bit each day, you now have a new hobby. You now have a new weekly item that you've done that turned into, what'll be 52 books at the end of the year, within the 12 months and beyond. So what felt like work after week 3 to week 7 has become part of the routine, but I do it for the aspect of gaining perspective. I'm not doing it to write any theses. I'm not doing it to write any conference talks on being an expert on it. The same reason where the content and the sessions from last week were just to gain perspective. So if I were to look at that from a career path decision, I was very passionate and still am with the MEP and the mission critical aspect of prefab. What I didn't have was enough insight to what other people were doing, and not into the weeds. So not proprietary softwares or methods or any type of special project delivery means, but I didn't have the ability to sit back and be poised with absorbing what was happening in the broader construction industry. So I am very much an all gas, no brakes type person. So I'm enjoying this change of pace for me to where it's It's not always free time. It's not always flex time. It's certainly not either one of those. But it's much more predictable in terms of, okay, I know how I can build out my schedules. But it's giving me a much more broad perspective on what's happening in the industry, especially as it relates to different niche pockets. So I've been able to learn more about solar. I've been able to learn more about horizontal construction. I've been able to learn about the high-end multifamily residential aspects that, might certainly will be looking a little different here as the next few months go along, as federal spending and interest rates are changing. So I knew what the high octane environment of mission critical modular delivery looked like, and I wanted to gain as much perspective as I could in the shortest amount of time. And I knew that tech would provide me that, or construction tech would provide me that to some extent. And I also really wanted to see what the feedback loop was from the construction side, being the contractors, to the developer side of construction, which, as you both know, especially Jonathan, I know you do, can be very cumbersome at times. There could be a big, significant gaps in awareness, terminologies, acronyms, and all that. But I knew what it was like to help build a tool, a software tool at my former companies that were homegrown, proprietary, but very robust for a dedicated purpose. So I knew what that looked like, but I didn't know what it looked like to operate at scale for a global construction market. And that is the perspective that I knew I couldn't replicate on the contractor side.
Yeah, that scale is a weird thing, isn't it? Like understanding like what it takes to do that and why you needed to do the homegrown software. That's its own little conversation that we need to have on the next episode. Because
on the next episode, definitely, I was gonna say we haven't. I was gonna throw out there we haven't shouted out Nathan Wood in a while. We probably almost a few bucks there for the respect for perspective, but that was perfectly summed up.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Right on. Thank you so much for joining us, Pete.
Thank you, Pete.
I'm going to let this be the end because, yes, we're definitely having Pete back on, and we're only going to talk prefab. We're not going to talk about anything else. You're not allowed to wear your AU hat. It's going to be all in on prefab because that was a wonderful perspective to have. If you're out there and you're listening and you want to understand how to really supercharge your prefab, that is it. Focusing on the goals, focusing on understanding what you're there to do. It was wonderful to have you, Pete. Thank you so much for coming on. Travis, always awesome to have you on with me. And hopefully next time, Jeff and Trent will join us. But this has been Construction Dorks.
Thanksgiving, by the way.
Oh, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, gentlemen. Jonathan, Travis, it was a pleasure. Great conversation. And I'm truly looking forward to the next one.
For sure.
Right on. Pros, this has been episode 73, AU Vegas Reloaded.